Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, I'm going to build a tier list, a muscle building tier list, using 20 different variables. Before I get into this topic, if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. The best topic ideas I turn into videos just like this. If you need coaching, I'd love to work with you. Check out the link down below. And don't forget, every Friday I'm here on YouTube at 11 a.m. Eastern answering your questions, Massive Iron Live. All right, so I've been discussing tier lists a lot lately and finally getting around to do one. In this video, I got 20 different variables. They're on the right of my ganky little Google Docs, and I'm going to place them in order here live in this video based on what I think is the top tier and what I think is the bottom tier when it comes to muscle building. Now, obviously, when you're doing something like this, you're forced to structure things. And things at the bottom don't necessarily mean they're unimportant, but you have to order things some way, somehow. So the stuff at the top, I believe, is the most important. And then we'll work our way down to the least important. So let's get into things. This is probably going to be a live video. I'm just going to work through things on video. I've not thought through this before. I asked Team Massive for some ideas. And I probably left a few things off of this list. So if I left something off, just let me know in the comments down below. All right, let's get into things. I'm just going to start by taking the top thing on the list and tossing it into the table, and we can kind of move things around. Now, obviously, consistency is super important. We're going to drop that in just as a starting point. Progressive overload. Now, where does progressive overload compare to consistency? Well, obviously, you need consistency to grow. Obviously, you need progressive overload to grow. If you don't have consistency, you're not going to grow. If you don't have progressive overload, you're not going to grow. Now, you can have consistency without progressive overload. So with that said, I'm going to rank progressive overload more important than consistency. Again, you can be consistent in the gym. There's a lot of guys that are consistent in the gym, but they're not overloading. They're not getting stronger, and they're not pushing for more than their last workout. So for this reason, progressive overload is more important than consistency. All right, next up is exercise selection. Exercise selection. Obviously, we want a reasonable exercise selection. Do your exercises matter? Yes. Are there guys in the gym with just a crappy exercise selection? Yes. They can be consistent. They can be consistent in the gym, but if they don't have a bright or a solid exercise selection, they're not going to make the best progress. So for that reason, I'm going to bump this down a little bit, and I'm going to slide in exercise selection. Now, you can have progressive overload on a solid exercise selection, or you could have progressive overload on a crappy exercise selection. So exercise selection is going to be a little bit more important than progressive overload. Let me explain. If you just put in crazy bro exercises, front lateral raises and lat pulls and just stuff that isn't highly efficient or effective, and you use progressive overload, you're not going to make a lot of gains. If you have a top-notch exercise selection that really challenges you, and we're not getting into specific exercises, but you need a good exercise selection that challenges you, and you apply progressive overload, you're going to grow. So for that reason, exercise selection is a little bit more important than progressive overload in the logic flow. All right, now calorie surplus. We're talking about eating enough to grow. You have a bunch of lifters out there trapped into maintaining. I want to just hold my weight and magically gain 20 pounds of muscle and lose 20 pounds of fat. I would say calorie surplus is very important. You can have consistency, but if you're not eating to grow, what does it matter? You can try to attack progressive overload, but if your calorie surplus isn't in check, it's going to make progressive overload harder. You can have the best exercise selection, but if you don't have a calorie surplus or if you're not eating to grow, what does it matter? So, calorie surplus, I'm going to move to the top of our 4 variables right now. All right, variable number 5, max safe reps. Now, we're not talking about training to failure, but in the massive iron world, we're going to use at least 1 set per exercise where we push for max safe reps. This is kind of safe progression. We don't need to push a set into the punishment zone, but it's very important for progression and it's very important for overall set and exercise intensity that we push at least 1 set per exercise for max safe reps. Now, you can have the best exercise selection in the world, but if you're not pushing a little bit for max safe reps, what does it matter? You can be in a calorie surplus, but if you're not pushing at least 1 set per exercise for max safe reps, what does it matter? So, having some degree of set exercise intensity is going to be important. It's going to be important. If not, if you're just kind of holding steady on your sets, you're not pushing hard, you're going to just be in a fat bulk. Now, there are some gray areas here. We have max safe reps and we have progressive overload. Progressing over time is important, or trying to progress over time is important, but a little bit more important is increasing your overall set intensity. One of the things I teach in the massive iron world is maximize a set, you maximize an exercise. Maximize your exercises, you maximize your workouts. So when we have at least 1 set per exercise where we're maximizing that, we're increasing the average rep intensity, we're really increasing the overall quality of our workouts. All right, next up on the list is 72 hard sets per week. For those of you guys unaware, in the massive iron world, when it comes to programming, I usually start with about 72 hard sets per week. This allows about 4 workouts at about 18 hard sets per workout. This isn't a rule, like you must do this, but it does allow for a good amount of volume for your chest, delts, quads, and back, and it allows for a minor amount of volume or a reasonable amount of volume for your biceps, triceps, hamstrings, and other things. So how important is it to hit 72 hard sets a week? Now, you can have a good exercise selection, but if you're not getting in a reasonable amount of hard sets per week, what does it matter? You can have a calorie surplus, but if you're not getting in a reasonable number of hard sets per week, what does it matter? Then again, we have to look at overall volume. Maybe you can only get in 54 hard sets per week. Maybe you can only get in 48 hard sets per week. It would probably be better for me just to put in a reasonable number of hard sets per week. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these up a little bit. And this is really a tough one, so we could probably split hairs on this. Progressive overload is obviously important. I'm going to put this. This is basically your weekly volume, and it's kind of lower-ish on the results tier list. I mean, you could do 48 to 54 hard sets a week and still get really good results. So it's not quite as important as some of these other variables. All right, now here's a hard one. Barbell and dumbbell exercises. There is kind of a cult of barbell where we can over-focus on barbell exercises, but barbell and dumbbell exercises are kind of the A1. They're kind of the gold standard when it comes to hypertrophy and strength building. So where would we put these on this tier list? I would say that having quality exercises, barbell and dumbbell, is almost more important than how many hard sets you do a week. So having a little bit more focus on these when you have less sets per week would be a good idea. Now I'm going to move these up. I'm going to say that not quite as important as progressive overload. And let me think through this a little bit because we do have exercise selection up above. I would say your overall exercise selection is more important than whether you're relying specifically on barbell and dumbbell exercises for each body part. It's more of a bigger picture. What is the overall impact we're having on that body part with all the exercises we're attacking it with? You can have barbell and dumbbell exercises in the mix, but if you don't have progressive overload, you're not going to grow. You can have dumbbell and barbell exercises in the mix, but if you don't have a good quality, well-rounded exercise selection for that body part, then your program is going to kind of lack. Here, let me explain. Let's say you just did barbell variations for chest. Would that be the best exercise selection, the best well-rounded exercise selection for hypertrophy? I would argue not. Therefore, a well-rounded exercise selection is probably better or more important on our tier list than just straight barbell and dumbbell exercises. All right, training frequency, everyone's favorite argument. I'm going to flush that way down on the scale because it really, really doesn't matter over 3, 5, 10 years, whatever. If you are consistent, if you got all these other variables in place, training frequency is not going to matter much at all. Anybody that believes it does is just kind of over drinking the Kool-Aid, focusing on one tree instead of the bigger picture. If you go into the gym, if you took 10 lifters today and put them on a full body or an AB split or a body part split and they had everything nailed down, do you really think there's going to be a lot of difference over 10 years in what they look like, their strength levels, their muscularity? No, there's not going to be much of a difference. But kind of what we get into in this modern world of lifting is that we overemphasize one variable like it's the be all end all. Like there's this huge gap or gulf between frequency training and body part split training. To take it a little bit further, some of the science that we looked at last year, some of the meta-analyses on training frequency versus body part splits showed us this. One of the reasons why frequency studies were showing greater growth was because they had more volume. So what we found out when we equated the volume, had the same amount of weekly volume between a body part split and a AB split or a full body, when volume was equated, there really wasn't any difference how you train. This isn't my opinion. A lot of the top tier guys in the muscle building world shared this information. So while we're not saying this is the rule, we're saying this is the current science or our current interpretation of the science, it really doesn't matter. In any case, training frequency is low on this tier list. All right, I'm going to move on to sleep. Dr. Mike called it, I don't know what he said, more anabolic than steroids or something like that. Pretty much nonsense. Sleep, while sleep is important, it's not super critical. You don't have to have perfect sleep. Now, with that said, if you are someone that has sleep issues, you probably need to see a doctor or get those fixed. But sleep is not going to be as critical if you have a lot of these things nailed down. Basically, if you're super consistent, you're working hard, you have a good exercise selection, a calorie surplus, and you're pushing hard in the gym, sleep is a lot less important. Is it more important than training frequency? That's a good question. I would rank it a little bit higher on the importance scale than training frequency because I really don't think training frequency matters at all. In fact, I'm just going to drop that to the bottom of the barrel. Now test levels, we're kind of getting into some of the more areas that don't matter as much. A lot of men tend to think test levels matter a lot. Now, if you look at the natural women that are training hard with all these variables in place, they're making good progress. They have much lower test levels than men who have what's considered to be low testosterone. So test levels going to be lower on the scale. I would rate sleep more important than test levels. And test levels, I don't know. I still think training frequency doesn't really matter at all. Test levels probably matters just a hair more than training frequency. All right, let's skip on to hydration. Now there can be an over focus on hydration, and we don't want to over focus on hydration to the point where we're just getting ridiculous and peeing every 12 minutes and so on and so forth. There are folks like that in the fitness industry. Normal hydration, not being underhydrated or mildly dehydrated, that's not a good condition to be in. So I'm going to bump training frequency up a little bit. I'm going to drop hydration to the bottom of the list. It's as long as you're getting in a reasonable amount of hydration, you're going to be fine. We don't need to micromanage hydration. As long as it's normal and not anything that's crazy, it's really nothing to worry about. All right, so next up, I'm going to put in food choices. Food choices. Do your food choices really matter? Well, if you're eating just junk, yes, it certainly matters. I mean, but if you're eating a reasonable degree of protein, you're eating probably 80-20 or even 70-30, you're getting in a reasonable degree of micronutrients. We're talking reasonable levels here, not anybody that's ridiculously anti-healthy or anti-abusive. Doesn't matter which protein source you eat, which protein sources you eat, which plant-based choices you eat. Not really. I'm going to rate this pretty low on the scale here. I'm going to move these things up. If your protein intake's reasonable and your calories are reasonable and you are getting in some reasonable protein and plant-based choices, which choices you use really don't matter. So we'll kind of move those down the scale a little bit. Meal timing. Now there can be some, I'm not saying here that meal timing doesn't matter at all. We have to use common sense. For me, having some fast digesting carbs post workout always felt good. I like to get in some protein post workout. I think there can be an argument made that we have to be reasonable. I mean, we can't try to be like anti meal timing and just, I'm going to show you, I'm just not going to eat for 36 hours after a workout. This is ridiculous and not, conducive to muscle building. But as long as we're getting in our daily calories and our daily protein, then we're going to be fine. So meal timing isn't as critical as daily intake. It certainly can have some benefits on how we feel after a workout, right? Who wants to go hungry for like 6 hours after a solid workout? But in the course of a day, from the perspective of a day, as long as you're getting in your calories and protein, things are going to be okay. Now, does meal timing matter as much as test levels? Does meal timing matter as much as training frequency? I would say that meal timing it's a little bit more important than training frequency. When you time your meals, eating when you feel hungry after a workout is going to be more important than meal time or than training frequency. I would say it's more important than test levels. Is it more important than sleep? That's a good question. I think if we're looking at sleep, like you're constantly having sleep issues or you're constantly having meal timing issues, as long as you're getting in your calories and protein over the course of 24 hours, you're in good shape. I would say that sleep is more of a critical issue. If it's constantly off, I would say that's an area of concern. So I would put sleep or recovery above meal timing. All right, so we have 7 to go. Let's dive back into nutrition. We have meal frequency. There are some indications, some science, some research that says eating every 3 to 4 hours, a good quality amount of protein, 30 to 40 grams, can be kind of beneficial for the muscle building process. But again, here we're looking at things like through the training frequency lens. How big is this as far as importance? Is it a huge degree of importance, or is it just kind of minor and there's a slight advantage for eating more frequently? I would say while eating every 3 to 4 hours kind of has a slight advantage, it's not a big advantage and it's not super important. I would rate sleep above meal frequency. Now we have meal frequency versus meal timing. Do I think it's more important to time your meals to make sure you're not starving or depleted going into your workouts? Do I feel it's more important to eat when you're hungry post workout and get the recovery process moving? Yes. So I would probably put meal timing above meal frequency. All right, let's look at exercise form. There can be a lot of bad definitions of exercise form. But if we look at quality exercise form, for our squats and deadlifts, we all can figure out what that is. Quality exercise form means everything is dialed in, nailed in, and we're getting as much as we can out of the exercises. For all of our other exercises, it's basically having a focused exercise that allows for good feel, good contraction. So, what is the opposite of good exercise form? Well, you can do a set of lat pull downs where you're just trying to speed through them to get reps, and there's no control of the weight and there's no focus. This is kind of anti form. Same thing for seated cable rows, or even pull ups. People not going all the way down and extending. They're just kind of doing halfway down and trying to get through a set and knock out reps and get their numbers. How important is exercise form? Well, you can be consistent, but if you don't have good exercise form, you're not getting much out of your workouts. You can do hard sets per week, but if you don't have good exercise form, you're not getting much out of your workouts. You can have all of these things in place. You can attack progressive overload, but if your exercise form is shit, you're probably not going to get not going to get as much out of the muscle building process. You can eat in a calorie surplus, but if your form is crap and you're not really maximizing an exercise, you're just doing a fat bulk. And you can take sloppy sets, sloppy form for max reps, and arguably they're not going to be safe, but some people think they're going to be safe. So exercise form is going to be a little bit higher on the tier list. It's kind of one of the foundations. You need it in place for these other things to matter. All right, supplements. Let's drop down to supplements. Do you need creatine? Do you need B12? Do you need fish oil? Do you need any of these things? Not really. Over the course, it's not that they can't have benefits. We know creatine can have benefits. But over the course of 3, 5, 7, 10 years of hard training, are they required or are they a nice little bonus? If you took 100 guys that went without supplements and 100 that went with supplements, and you put them all on the perfect path, would there be much at all of a difference over 10 years? No, not really. So supplements are very, very unimportant as far as the tier list. In fact, I'm probably just going to drop them to the bottom of the list just because they can be nice, but they're completely optional. So let's just move supplements to the bottom of our tier list. All right, we have 4 variables left. Let's go with rest between sets. There's a lot of arguments for rest between sets. How long do you rest between sets? But really, as long as we are servicing hard work, what does that mean? Our focus is on hard training. Rest until you physically and mentally feel ready to go again, until you can attack that next set. If you do this, then you are servicing hard work. Your focus is on, I'm going to maximize the last set, and we're going to let the rest just kind of take care of itself until I feel ready to attack that next set. So in that sense, as long as we are doing that, it doesn't matter what the rest periods are. So in this sense, we could get into discussions and debates. Minimizing rest between sets, does that impact hypertrophy? Well, it can in a rest pause sense, but that's not really what we're talking about here. We also have the other camp that wants to extend rest out to infinity. Rest between sets, though, in a practical sense, really doesn't mean much. As long as it's reasonable and you're recovered and you're ready to attack the next set, it's just not super important how long specifically you're resting. Where does it fall on this tier list? Good question. Is training frequency more important than rest between sets? No. Training frequency really doesn't matter. Test levels really doesn't matter. I'm going to bump sleep up. I'm going to bump meal timing up. I'm going to bump meal frequency up because meal frequency can have some value if structured properly. First, you want to have your meal timing in place. You want to feel good going in your workouts. You kind of want to get the recovery process started after your workouts. And then after that, you can structure meal frequency around things. But rest in between sets, I'm going to drop below that. Just not quite as important. Nothing we need to overthink or over worry about or over structure. All right, we only have a few left. Exercise variety. I think exercise variety is a good thing. We don't want to just attack each muscle group with one exercise. using different tools, 3 or 4 for major body parts, 2 or 3 for minor body parts. We're attacking a muscle or group of muscles with different tools, different methods, and I think that can add a lot of value when it comes to muscle building. Now, if you were in a calorie surplus but didn't have a quality exercise variety, you could still grow. You could still be okay. If you had progressive overload and didn't have a quality variety of exercises, you could still grow. Exercise variety is obviously more important than sticking to just dumbbell and barbell exercises. So I'm going to move these up on the list and let's think through this just a little bit. Exercise selection, exercise variety kind of are the same thing. Variety means more. You're varying the attacks, dumbbell, barbell, body weight, cable, machine, that sort of thing, where exercise selection is more the overall impact. Overall, when we look at what we have that's attacking a muscle group in the bigger picture, does this selection just attack a muscle group in the bigger sense? Variety, we're not looking at that in the same way. We're not looking at does it attack the muscle group in a bigger sense. We're looking more at a variety, getting a different variety of exercises in the mix. Again, like barbell or dumbbell or machine or cable or body weight. So therefore, I put exercise variety a little bit more important than obviously just getting in your barbell and dumbbell exercises. A good quality exercise variety is going to include these. All right, 2 left. Rep ranges. Where do rep ranges? Everybody's obsessed with rep ranges. Specific rep ranges don't really matter as long as they're reasonable. So we're going to assume that your rep ranges are reasonable for hypertrophy. If your rep ranges are reasonable, having specific dialed in rep ranges isn't going to matter. We don't need to over focus on rep ranges. It's more important to be consistent than it is to worry about what rep ranges we're working in. It's more important to get in at least a reasonable amount of hard sets per week than to worry about what rep ranges we're in. And, obviously it's more important to focus on progressive overload than to worry about the vehicle, the rep range. So I'm going to keep rep ranges down here below consistency. And now we have hard training left on the list. It's the last thing on the list. And we're going to move hard training right to the top. Hard training is not just the same as max safe reps. It's more of a mentality. It's more, I'm going to go into this set and get everything out of this set that I can. And if you are not in that mindset, then you are not going to grow. Hard training can even sometimes overtake the importance of exercise form. I've seen guys grow with subpar exercise form. Now, I'm not giving you an excuse to use crappy exercise form, but I've seen some big, strong guys with mediocre form. They were in the gym giving it. They understood hard training, and they were tearing it up. Hard training goes far beyond just maximizing one set per exercise. It's a whole different level, a whole different mindset, and it gets the job done. So there you have it, guys. My muscle building tier list, 20 variables. Let me know if I left out a variable. Let me know if you feel one of these variables is more important than how I placed it in the list. So guys, hope this video has been of some help. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. If you made it this far in this video and have yet to subscribe to my channel, please do. I'd appreciate the support. So guys, as always, thanks for watching. Have a great day.